It's that time of year again, and our Steamian overlords have blessed us with another nextfest. And I have sifted through the pile to find 6 strategy games I think are worth trying and keeping an eye on. Alright, let's begin with Chaos Front. This game is the up-and-coming title by Chaos Galaxy Studios, a one-man development studio. This game is quite a departure from their previous games, where they were mainly traditional turn-based strategy games. Chaos Front is, while still a turn-based game, focused on controlling a mercenary company during a time of intergalactic chaos. Playing the demo, I found it quite similar to Mount & Blade Warband or Bannerlord, in the sense that out of the 3 battles, 2 involved allies, and the game outright told you when your mercenary company grows large enough, you will have to commit to one of the factions and help them conquer the sector. The gameplay for Chaos Front is very reminiscent of Super Robot Wars or the Advance Wars franchise. There are 2 kinds of units, ships and mechs, or arms as the game calls them. Your arms can dock and undock from their host ship as many times as they like in a battle, and they can move in groups of up to 3, and they can also split as they like in battle. This gives a lot of flexibility. You can have all of your arms roam around in a single unit and then divide them up into different groups to target different enemies. And when an arm takes too much damage, you could have them split off from the rest and retreat back to their ship, where they can recover. Arms also have a variety of weaponry. Of the 3 arms we saw in the demo, 2 were melee attacks, but one of them's melee attack set fire to his enemies, and the third had a range attack, which had a percentage chance to hit for each individual shot. Ships also seem to have multiple forms of weaponry. The ship we had access to in the demo had the ability to ram other ships and mechs, forcing them back a square, and if they collided with another unit, then they would both take damage. Enemy ships mainly had long-ranged weapons. Unfortunately, we didn't get to play with one of those in the demo, although towards the end of the demo you had the option to buy a frigate, which had a basic turret attack. You also didn't seem to control any generic characters. Every character we had access to in the demo had skills, both passive and active, and their own portrait and backstory. If the previous Chaos Galaxy is any thing to go by, there will likely be around 100 potential characters in this game. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly how many Chaos Galaxy 2 had, but I think it's around 96, so I'm hoping this game will also be filled with characters that you can both recruit and kill as part of the game. If I was to list the only negative I really experienced in the demo, it's that when one of your heroes has access to their ability, there's no real indicator telling you that is so unless you click on the skills section and see if they can actually activate it. I would like something to indicate on the main combat screen that they can activate their ability without having to click that button to see. But that's a very, very minor complaint. Another thing that I didn't really like was the lack of planetary features. All of the other Chaos Galaxy games have planetary features in the form of asteroids which block ships and only mechs can move past, or planets that you can rest to regain energy and health, but there weren't any of that in the demo. I hope that was just the demo, and in the full release there will be those in-battle mechanics instead of battles just being open plains to fight in. I really enjoyed my time with the demo. It's one of those demos where I wish it had gone on longer, or I wish the game was already released so I could play it right now and to completion. There's a good chance that Chaos Front will be my game of the year for 2025, although I mainly play indie games and strategy games, so my opinion isn't that valuable in this sense. Chaos Front is predicted to release in the later half of 2025, and hopefully it will, but anything happens, so we'll see. Next we have Dark Moon. This game is about trying to outrun the sun by heading on the dark side of the moon. First of all, I thought the story and premise were very interesting, especially the aspect of having to manage your surviving humans and the factions they form aboard your spider bot. The places where this demo didn't wow me were in the actual gameplay, where it seemed that you would mainly be moving around in these static areas, thumping the ground with your spider to find deposits for your bots to harvest so that you could mine the minerals. I'm hoping that that's just the early game, and that later on it'll be much more involved and there'll be many more mechanics. But it wasn't horrible. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't the most exciting thing ever. So I'm hoping later on in the game things will really ramp up. We did see some minor combat in the demo, but when I say minor, it was very minor in the sense that there were turrets, you walked close to them, and your gun shot them and destroyed them, so they didn't even fight back. It wasn't very engaging. Although after that section with the turrets, we actually meet another spider bot who joins us, so maybe later on in the game you'll have a convoy of spider bots and have to engage in large-scale battles, perhaps with other spiders, so I hold out hope in that regard. This game's gameplay definitely didn't wow me, but its story and setting was definitely interesting, so I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this one, although hopefully what we've seen of the gameplay will be massively expanded in the full release. Dark Moon is predicted to release in the second quarter of 2025, so not that far away. Next we have Chains of Freedom. This is a turn-based tactics game set after some apocalypse has brought an end to the Earth. We play as a group of 4 soldiers who are sent to eliminate detractors from the post-apocalypse government. But of course things don't go as planned, and there are some implications that maybe we're not the good guys. The game also has a very nice comic book-like art style, as well as some very well done voice acting. The actual combat is your usual affair of turn-based tactics. You can take cover, you can fire on the enemy, there's percentage chance to hits, you can get 100% chance to hit if you're close enough. There's also melee combat. You can use a knife to directly stab the enemy in the same way they might run and attack you. There are human enemies, there are monsters, there are mutated humans. It's all very typical in that regard. The one thing that set this game apart a bit, I think, was resource management. You had to count each individual bullet in your gun, and resources were quite hard to come by. You rarely found ammo except for on the bodies of defeated enemies. You could directly create bullets through scavenging things in the environment, but it definitely felt like a game where you were going to have to keep an eye on your resources and try as much as possible to kill enemies without using ammo, or maybe avoid enemies entirely. If I had one complaint about the game, is that there was no run in the exploration sections, which, when it didn't matter as much in the demo, but when the full game is released, there'll definitely need to be some sort of run, because the exploration areas are quite large, especially once you've eliminated all the enemies and you have to go around and picking up any loot they've dropped and exploring the zone. You need some sort of exploration run during those sections, or they're going to become very tedious very quickly. But that was my only complaint about the game. Everything ran smoothly, everything played well. I didn't feel it was unbalanced in any way, although I did think the AI was a little stupid. At times I saw them run directly into fire that then set them on fire, so that's something to be aware of. Overall, I found the game very enjoyable, and I'm excited for the full release. The game is planned to release in 2025, but we don't know exactly when, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Next is Nordhold. This game seems to be a mix of tower defense and incremental gameplay. You do construct towers to defend against enemy waves, and then between waves you assign your worker population to various places within your kingdom, which will then give you resources every wave. Then you have meta resource called Honor, which you can use to buy permanent upgrades to your buildings in your kingdom. Altogether, I thought the mechanics blended together quite well, although there was no story in the demo and the game may not even have one, so we'll have to see whether the gameplay is strong enough to carry the game on its own. In my view, it could. It will depend on how much content is in the game and how long it takes you to acquire all the prestige unlocks and ability. Nordhold is set to release on March 25th, which is around 3 weeks from now, so if you're interested, definitely keep an eye on this one. Then we have HistoriCity Florence. In this game, we're charged with rebuilding a village after the plague has come through and killed everybody. It has quite a few interesting mechanics for a city builder. For example, we have to deal with corpses of the plague victims, and your villagers won't interact with buildings with plagued victims nearby. You also need to, of course, gather resources like wood, stone, food to supply your villagers. Villagers can die if they're unsupplied with food. And this game has a realistic depiction of farming, where your villagers will grow the crops in autumn and winter, and then harvest them in spring, and then do literally nothing for summer. So that's something of interest to keep in mind, as we rarely get many games that actively depict farming in a realistic way. The game quite reminded me of early city builders like Caesar 3, in the sense that your houses, you can't upgrade them, they level up based on the attractiveness of their area. So as I said, quite similar to the old city builders like Caesar 3 or Pharaoh in that regard. You can upgrade other buildings using your resources, for example upgrading your woodcutter so that more woodcutters can work there, or upgrading your stonesmith so that more people can work there, or upgrading your farm so that more people can work there. So it's very traditional in those regards. I don't normally like city builders, but I enjoyed this one quite a lot, so which is why I'm recommending it in this video. Unfortunately, this game has no release date. It might release this year, or it might release the next year, or it might release 10 years from now. Unfortunately, there's no information on either way, so it's not one I'm going to be keeping immediate eye on, but I'll be excited for when it actually comes out. Now we have Break Siege. This game, if I would describe it, is basically card-based, train-based FTL. You drive your train around on a global map along lanes, very similar to FTL, and then you fight battles, but unlike FTL, where you would be fighting with another ship directly and be able to target individual parts of the ship. Instead, you have your train and attack from the air and have to play cards to deploy defenses, to deploy to deploy turrets onto your train's carts, to deploy missiles to attack enemy ships, to deploy shields to protect your ship, though some enemies can get around it. And as you go along, you visit various places along the track towards your destination, which is to essentially escape the oncoming army. Just like FTL, there will be pursuers that will catch up to you if you take too long in these various sectors before getting to your destination. You also were able to upgrade your carts, and your cards by visiting various places. For example, you'd visit factories and get different carts that would replace your existing carts. For example, a healing cart, where if a turret was on top of that cart, you would regain health if it kills an enemy. And then you can upgrade your cards to be slightly better. For example, I upgraded one of my turrets so that it shot 9 bullets instead of 6 even. There's also heroes and companions you can recruit, although they don't seem to do anything other than provide a passive bonus, and they can be used for some quests that you can find in locations where you can order your crew to work at places which will take up time, and you will receive something in return, of course, which, of course, it taking up time leads to the enemy getting closer to catching you, so it's something you have to choose between the potential rewards or the consequences of being caught by the pursuing enemies. And then when you reach the end of a level, you fight a FTL-like boss who, honestly, he's not that different from most of the other enemies, but he's a lot stronger, obviously. The boss I fought at the end of the demo had around 700 health. Overall, I'm a little in two minds about this game. I felt like a lot of the cards weren't clear on what exactly they would do or what effect they would have, so that made it hard to know what I was using my cards and what they actually did. So readability is definitely something that I think this game needs to work on. It's not an English-speaking studio, clearly. It's a Chinese one, so those sort of problems are inevitable. But so it's just something they'll just have to work on continuously. I mean, it was readable, but there were just some things that I didn't know what they did until I played them and saw what exactly the effects meant in actual gameplay terms. For example, there's a card that I could play that said it would give a passive buff to any of my turrets that I built, but it didn't affect turrets that had already been built, so I had to replace my existing turrets after I'd played the card in order to receive the benefit of it. And it would have been nice to know that on the card before I played it, but it's a minor problem really, because in a game like this, as you play, you would learn what the cards do and you'd memorize it to a large degree. Overall, I did enjoy this game quite a lot, despite the shortcomings when it comes to readability. It's predicted to release sometime this year, though we don't have a concrete release date. This is definitely a game I'll be keeping an eye on. Now for our final game, we have The Great Villainess, Strategy of Lily. So this game was a game I was a little unsure about downloading and playing, but I was actually surprised at how good it was and how much I enjoyed it. So it's rather simple gameplay-wise. You move your forces around on a three-dimensional map, and then when you come into contact with enemies on that map, you have these two-dimensional battles. You also have an airship which you can fly around on the map and delay enemies with, or even capture enemy officers using. I think the main thing that drew me to this game is the idea of having lots of branching plots and having lots of different endings and trying to get the one true ending where they actually don't all just horribly die. I'm a real sucker for games with alternate routes and alternate endings, if that's not obvious already. So I did find the gameplay quite enjoyable, if a little simple, units having a more rock, paper, scissors style to them than maybe some other games, with riflemen defeating horsemen, horsemen defeating cannons, and cannons defeating riflemen. So there's although in the demo we only got to control 2 individual units, so there's definitely room for it to be expanded, and if there's lots of different characters with lots of different abilities, it could easily become quite complex, so I'm looking forward to that. I did find the demo a little difficult. I died twice during it, but that's a good thing, because if it had been too easy, it wouldn't have interested me as much as I think, so I'm glad there's at least some difficulty. And I found quite humorous is that when you die, your characters often comment on your death, and they had different lines of dialogue depending on who you die to. So maybe in a way this game will end up being like a bad end collector, where you die in all sorts of ways just to see the characters banter about you dying. Overall, I'm not a big fan of anime-style games, but this game definitely caught my interest, and I'm excited to play it when it's released. The Great Villainess Strategy of Lily is set to release in the second quarter of 2025, so we're quite close. Thank you for watching my video. I know I said I won't make many more videos this month, but clearly I can't be trusted, and I'm a bit of a maverick in that regard. Are there any demos that jumped out at you? Don't hesitate to share them in the comments. I'm always on the lookout for more games thrown to my never-ending and always expanding wishlist. Did you play any of the demos I talked about here? Again, don't hesitate to share your thoughts, even if you hated them. My next video is still going to be Kessin 2, so look forward to that. Thank you again for watching.